welcome in to the RotoWire Esports Show. My name is Andrew Laird, joined, I'll say it now, as always, by Ethan Sexton to talk about Monday's two-game LPL slate. Ethan, we had two sweeps on Sunday, which I guess wasn't all that shocking, although I feel like we would have expected two sweeps on Saturday more than the two sweeps on Sunday, but that's League of Legends for you. We've got two more two-game slates. We were just talking about this, and then the LCK comes back where we'll start getting some bigger slates at least 5 days a week. So Monday we've got BLG favored over E-Star and RNG favored over TT.
Yep.
Really went on a limb on that name for the name change, but looks like RNG is going to be where everyone goes.
And it's they're the biggest favorites on the day, but they're not a team that instills that much confidence in you, especially for people who played them a lot last year. You'll remember, people will remember that, they don't inspire you with that much confidence. They can definitely be beaten on their day. I do think they deserve to be the biggest favorites, and all that stuff, but they've made a few interesting offseason moves. So they moved their former starting mid laner, Zhao Hu, into the top lane. He's now the starting top laner. And the main reason they did that was to make room for Cryan. And Cryan is a really good mid laner who most people probably remember played for E-Star during the spring split last year when E-Star were firing on all cylinders. He was very good on that E-Star team and really kind of was one of the main pieces that propelled them to a high finish in the spring of 2020. And then he joined RNG for the summer split, and he pretty much rode the bench the entire summer split, I think, behind Zhao Hu. But they opened up a spot for him here in the summer, and he's deserving. He's a really talented mid laner and a good player. And they've also brought in former E-Star jungler Wei, who's going to start as the jungler tomorrow. So you've got some built-in mid-jungle synergy right there with two former E-Star players, and we know that they're a very good mid-jungle duo from their time together on E-Star. So it's a good start for them to be. TT have a roster that is kind of interesting if we look at it. So they've got kind of a weak top jungle duo. Chalitzi and Bless are, average to below average kind of players. They're not great. But Captain is a mid laner who comes up from the LDL, which is China's development league, like we've talked about a couple times. And I believe he was on the team that won the LDL title last year, and he was a big reason why. And then they also have a support they brought up from the LDL, and I believe he finished on a team that finished in the top 3 as well, and he was a big reason why. From everything I've read, I don't watch the LDL, to be perfectly honest with everybody, but from everything I've read, both of those players were big reasons why their teams were successful. And then they have Sam D, who was on Victory 5 last split in the summer when Victory 5 went on their ascension after a horrible spring split, and he was a big reason why. So they have some interesting pieces. I expect RNG to win. I do, and I think they deserve to be favored, of course. But it wouldn't shock me if TT pulled off an upset here. I wouldn't put a ton of money on it, but like we've talked about, if you're doing multi-entry and those things, I would definitely sprinkle some TT into multi-entry, just because they do have some talented pieces, and RNG love to disappoint.
With the way that people seem to so heavily roster like the biggest favorite, we saw on Saturday everybody had Top Esports, and Suning was like the very clear pivot from that, and they won and they swept, and anybody who had them did really well. So at least RNG gives us the comfort of past disappointments. we can at least have a little more confidence in TT.
Yep, and plus on these two-game slates, going with the biggest underdog is definitely the way to differentiate your lineup on slates where there's going to be tons of duplicate lineups just because there's only 4 teams playing.
Yeah. We also kind of talked about how like new teams or new players on teams, might take them a little time to adjust. But like when you have multiple guys who have played together, they just happen to be on a new team, like maybe there's a little quicker synergy there than just a whole new pack of guys.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of the way I'm looking at this series is RNG should win. But TT, it looks like their strongest part of their lineup is going to be their bottom lane, and I would say that that's probably RNG's weakest part of their lineup. But I don't think that RNG's bottom lane is weak enough that it's really going to cause too many headaches for him tomorrow. Actually, Ming is a really great support. He's a really good support, so he's not the problem. It's mostly like Gala for RNG in the AD carry role is just kind of he's good, but he's not like one of the players in the league that really makes you go, wow, when he plays or stands out, So it is probably going to be a little bit of their weaker part of the map, assuming that Xiaohu adapts well into the top lane. And they are going against what looks to be TT's strongest part of their lineup, so it's possible. Like I said, I think RNG probably will win that series, but a 2-1 could happen, and an upset wouldn't shock me necessarily, but it would be a little surprising, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's always tough to hear, like, if you want to focus on the biggest favorite, that's RNG, and you're like, I usually want to start your build with either the AD carry or a mid, and you hear that like Gala's not that great, like. He's fine, right. But like you don't want to go all out and be like, oh no, I have to have him. Like it's not Jackie Love that you're like, I want him.
Like a Huan Fang or like even guys like that played today, like a Wink or somebody like that really like that they can take over and dominate games. He's mostly just like he's fine. Like he's very serviceable, and if his team's in the lead, he's a good front runner. Like he's not going to make a lot of mistakes or anything like that. But he hasn't been a guy in the past that can really come in and just take over games by himself either. So that's kind of where he is, But the rest of the lineup does look solid, and like I've said a few times, I still expect them to win, probably on the backs of that, on what should be a really good mid jungle duo that has built-in synergy already because they've played together.
One of my favorite things is describing fantasy plays as fine.
Yeah.
How do you see this other game going? I mean, obviously, E-Star's a decent underdog, but not as big as TT. Do you think they can upset as well?
I'm not as excited about them. I think people will remember the E-Star of last year, where they were a really exciting team that had a young roster with a lot of rookies, and those guys clicked and took off right away. The reason they're kind of built that way again this year, where they had this top laner Z's, I think he was on the LDL championship team last year. And they have a mid laner named Insulator that was on, I think, the second place team in the LDL. He's not starting tomorrow though. They have Irma starting, and then they have Rat and Xiaoxi, who played last year in their lineup. Rat played sporadically. He's an okay bottom laner, kind of below average, I would say, in the league. But Xiaoxi is proved last year he was one of the best supports in the league. So they have kind of this young lineup again this year, where they have some exciting pieces to build around for the future. And if they click right away, they could get off to a great start like the team did last year with a completely different lineup. But the reason I'm not as high on them is, while they do have some exciting pieces, in the jungle they have Hacker, who was one of the worst junglers in the league last year. So it was kind of a weird move for them to throw all these young players in that look like they could have some upside if they start clicking and get things going right away. But then they brought in, a guy who was one of the worst junglers last year to kind of be the jungler. And, the jungler in a lot of ways sets the tempo for every team, because he's the one that's going through each and every lane and making things happen. So that's kind of why I'm down on them. I really think in this matchup specifically, like for BLG, Meteor was arguably their best player last year in the jungle. And I think that jungle gap is going to prove too much tomorrow for E-Star. So I'm kind of discounting them, even more than TT, even though TT are much bigger underdogs on tomorrow's slate. I see better pieces on TT, and part of it maybe is because we haven't seen a lot of these E-Star players, so I'm not fully sure what to expect. But the main reason is just that jungle difference, that I think BLG has a huge jungle gap going into tomorrow. And they've also made a couple lineup improvements this year. So they've got Zika in the mid lane, who comes over. He looked pretty good. Not one of the top mid laners in the league or anything like that, but he looks pretty serviceable last year and capable of carrying games once in a while. He comes from Vici Gaming.
Yep.
He was pretty solid. But then their big off-season addition was Aiming came in from Korea, and Aiming was one of the best AD carries in Korea last year, even though he was on a fairly weak KT roster. especially in the summer split. He's an 80 carry, unlike a guy like Gala. Aiming is a guy who can take over these games and carry from the bottom lane. So that was a massive improvement as well. I like BLG tomorrow. I think they've got a solid lineup. They might end up being a team that is just on the outside looking in of a playoff spot this year when it's all said and done. But they could fight their way in if a couple things go their way. And I like the lineup they put together and just feel a bit better about them tomorrow than I do about E-Star, especially since we haven't seen a lot of these E-Star pieces.
Do you have any concern about aiming coming into a new league that doesn't play or plays a little more aggressive or a lot more aggressively than the LCK?
No, I don't. And the only reason why, we kind of talked about this the other day when we were talking about Viper, and he was perfectly fine.
Yeah, he was perfectly fine.
He was good on Saturday. He had no problems at all. And, traditionally, like we've both said, the LCK is slower than the LPL. But actually, last year they started picking up the pace a lot. And I think it was because China had destroyed them at Worlds the year before. And they kind of realized, we got to adapt and play a little bit at a faster pace if we want to keep up with these guys. And I think Aiming is a good enough player that he can adapt right away, and he should be fine. And, he's got a solid support who knows the league with him in Mark. So they should be a pretty good duo going forward. So I'm not too concerned about him, I wouldn't say.
Okay. So you obviously don't sound like super optimistic about RNG. Obviously we expect them to win. You pretty much can't do an RNG BLG stack if you use either Gallo or Cryan. Like, it just doesn't work.
Right.
Let me see quickly if it works the other way, I guess. It just seems like people are more likely to want to combine them, just because that's what people want to do.
I think if you want to do a BLG RNG stack where you have one of the carries in the captain spot, you're going to have to go with 4 BLG. And I honestly don't, I don't mind that, to be completely honest. I think BLG, I feel maybe I'm overconfident on them, but I do feel pretty confident that they're going to take that series. I'm not going to say that it'll guaranteed be a 2-0, because E-Star, they should be able to at least put up a fight, I would think. But that could be good because, maybe the game doesn't blow out, it stays kind of close, and we get, some higher kill totals because, neither side is really running away with this thing. So I think if you want to do that and have a carry spot in the captain spot, you're going to have to probably play 4 BLG, 3 RNG would be the way to do it.
Yeah. Who do you think is the most popular player?
It's tough because, it's hard to fit these guys in sometimes, but you're probably looking at, just because I think what ends up happening, like we alluded to, is that the biggest favorite always usually has the highest percentage owned. So you're probably looking at Cryan or Gala as the highest owned player, but whether they're the highest owned captain, I'm not sure, because like you said, you really can't put them in the captain spot and then do a straight up 4-3 either way with RNG and BLG. So tomorrow's kind of an interesting one because I think primarily it's because like RNG is the biggest favorite and the quote unquote best team on the slate, whereas BLG, TT, and E-Star, they're all more like mid to lower level teams instead of, like a slate like today where IG and
JDG,
thank you. Just happened this morning. I forgot already. Those are going to be 2 top teams most likely at the end of the year. So that would kind of, one way or the other, they're going to be higher owned. But I think possibly tomorrow ownership might be a bit more spread out on the 3 teams that aren't RNG. I think, like, especially for people who are very casual players, I think RNG will be their kind of go-to just because they're such big favorites. But after that, we might see some closer ownership than we have so far this year. So it could be a good slate just because, it doesn't really seem like, I don't know, it doesn't really seem like those 3 teams except RNG are going to be overly popular necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Good call on IG, by the way.
Yes, we'll take credit for that one. I didn't expect the 2-0, but they came out swinging. But unfortunately for me, I just kind of had the wrong pieces. So small profit, right teams, wrong pieces. pieces, but that happens, so no big deal.
I was going to say that if there's one thing about League of Legends I've learned is that it's hard enough getting the teams right. Not always, but like it's hard enough. And then getting the teams right and then not getting the right pieces is
Yep. Yeah, you need a little bit of luck on your side, even if you're on the right team. So,
That's right.
But it is what it is.
That's right. That's right. All right. If you guys are enjoying these videos, if you just hit the like button below right there on YouTube and feel free to subscribe as well. We're going to have all this stuff posted on RotoWire.com as well, so you can find out the stuff there. As we've alluded to in previous episodes, you can find all of the expected and confirmed lineups right on RotoWire.com/esports. So check it out. Ethan, thanks, and good luck tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. You too.